The olive branch emerged from faster-than-light travel with none of the dramatic flair that usually accompanied first contact missions. No weapons charged, no shields at maximum, no fighter escorts streaming from launch bays in intimidating formations. Just a single diplomatic vessel, gleaming white and gold, broadcasting friendship on every known frequency as it approached the massive orbital station that housed the Galactic Assembly. Inside the ship's observation deck, Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood with her hands clasped behind her back, watching Concordia Station grow larger in the viewport. She was 53 years old, a career diplomat who had spent her entire adult life preparing for this moment. Her delegation consisted of 47 humans, scientists, artists, philosophers, linguists, and cultural specialists, not a single military officer among them. This had been deliberate, carefully planned. Humanity's first message to the galaxy would be one of peace. The station itself was a marvel of engineering, a ring-shaped structure 300 kilometers in diameter, home to the representatives of 347 spacefaring species. It had taken humanity 60 years to develop faster-than-light travel after detecting the assembly's existence through radio telescope arrays. 60 years of preparation, debate, and hope. Now, finally, they would take their place among the stars. What Ambassador Vasquez couldn't know, watching that station grow closer, was that she was about to become the subject of the galaxy's longest-running joke. The assembly hall was designed to intimidate. The chamber was vast enough to swallow a city block, with sections arranged in ascending tiers that placed the most powerful species literally above all others. At the summit sat the Krell Dominion, occupiers of 800 worlds, masters of fleets that had reduced entire civilizations to asteroids and dust. War Chancellor Thex'Mor occupied the Krell seat, his 4-meter-tall frame covered in ceremonial armor that displayed the conquest marks of 47 extinct species. When the human delegation entered, a curious hush fell over the chamber. New species were always of interest, particularly those bold enough or foolish enough to seek assembly membership. The gathered representatives studied the humans with various sensory organs: compound eyes, thermal pits, electromagnetic perception fields, quantum-entangled consciousness clusters. What they saw was unremarkable. Bipedal primates, average height, no natural weapons, no obvious evolutionary advantages. Scans showed they came from a high-gravity world with dangerous flora and fauna, but nothing exceptional by galactic standards. Ambassador Vasquez approached the central speaking platform, her small delegation arrayed behind her. She carried no weapons, wore no armor, displayed no symbols of military might. Instead, she carried a data crystal containing humanity's gift to the galaxy. "Honored members of the Galactic Assembly," she began, her voice translated instantly into 347 languages by the station's AI. "We come to you in peace and friendship. Humanity offers you the sum of our knowledge, our culture, our dreams. We have compiled our greatest scientific discoveries, our most beautiful art, our most profound philosophies. We ask for nothing in return but the opportunity to learn from you, to grow alongside you, to build a future together among the stars." The silence lasted exactly 4 seconds. Then the laughter began. It started in the lower tiers, among the younger species who had earned their seats through recent conquests. A chittering, hissing, bellowing sound that rippled upward through the chamber like a wave. Within moments, 2/3 of the assembly was convulsing with amusement. The humans stood frozen, uncertain how to process this reaction. War Chancellor Thex'Mor rose from his seat and the laughter died instantly. When the Krell spoke, nations trembled. "They bring us songs and poetry," Thex'Mor's voice boomed through the chamber, thick with contempt. "Where are your battle honors, humans? Your conquest records? Your subjugated species? You come before us bearing gifts of knowledge like primitive tribes offering tribute to their superiors." He leaned forward, his 6 eyes fixed on Vasquez. "Tell me, Ambassador, how many worlds have you conquered? How many species have bent knee before your might?" Vasquez felt her cheeks burn, but she kept her voice steady. "None, War Chancellor. Humanity believes that true strength comes from cooperation, not conquest. We seek to be partners, not conquerors." The laughter erupted again, louder this time. Thex'Mor's mandibles spread in what his species considered a smile. Cooperation, he repeated, as if the word itself was hilarious. The galaxy is not built on cooperation, little human. It is built on power. Those with strength take what they wish. Those without strength serve or die. This is the natural order. You will learn this lesson or you will become extinct learning it. He gestured dismissively. The Krell Dominion grants humanity provisional observer status. You may attend our sessions and speak when recognized. Perhaps in time, when you have conquered a few worlds and proven you can survive in the real galaxy, we will take you seriously. Until then, you are the Assembly's most entertaining new members. The session continued, but Vasquez barely heard it. She had prepared for many possible reactions to first contact: hostility, suspicion, cautious welcome. She had never imagined mockery. Over the next 60 years, humanity would discover that the Galactic Assembly operated on a simple principle: might made right. Species earned respect through displays of military power. Political weight was directly proportional to the size of one's fleet and the number of worlds under one's control. Diplomatic negotiations were really just wars conducted through different means, with the implicit threat of violence underlying every interaction. Humanity, in the galaxy's eyes, was doing everything wrong. Human colony ships spread across the stars, but they always asked permission before settling a system. When they found worlds claimed by other species, they negotiated for territory rather than simply taking it. Human trade vessels carried goods between species, charging fair prices rather than using economic leverage to gain political advantage. Human scientists shared their discoveries freely, asking only for collaboration in return. The galaxy watched this behavior with a mixture of amusement and confusion. The Vrin Collective's intelligence analysts spent years trying to determine humanity's true motives, certain that such apparent altruism must be concealing some deeper strategy. They found nothing. Humans really were exactly what they appeared to be: a species that genuinely believed in cooperation and peaceful coexistence. It was baffling. It was naive. It was hilarious. What the galaxy failed to notice were the details that didn't quite fit the narrative. Human colony ships were enormous, dwarfing most species' military vessels. When questioned about this, humans explained they were simply building for efficiency. Why waste resources on multiple smaller ships when one large vessel could carry everything needed to establish a thriving colony? Human cargo vessels possessed power cores that could supply energy to entire planets. Humans explained this was necessary for long-distance travel and the operation of their massive cargo holds. No one questioned why a civilian vessel needed that much power. Human mining operations clustered around black holes, neutron stars, and other extreme stellar phenomena. Humans explained they were conducting research into exotic matter and energy extraction. The research papers they published were genuine, well-documented, and freely shared. Human defensive installations around their colonies were surprisingly sophisticated, with sensor arrays and computational power that exceeded most species' military networks. Humans explained they needed robust tracking systems to coordinate their extensive civilian traffic and to monitor asteroid threats. All perfectly reasonable explanations, all completely true, all concealing the deeper truth. Because while humanity was building a civilization based on peace and cooperation, they were also remembering where they came from. Earth had not been kind to humanity's ancestors. They had evolved on a world that killed casually and constantly. Predators hunted them. Diseases ravaged them. Weather patterns could wipe out entire populations. Competing human tribes warred with each other over resources. Humanity had survived by becoming the most dangerous, most adaptable, most intelligent predator on a planet full of things trying to kill them. Then, after millions of years of struggle, they had made a choice. They had chosen civilization over savagery. They had chosen cooperation over competition. They had chosen to be more than just another apex predator, but they had never forgotten how to be dangerous. They had just chosen not to be. The galaxy mistook that choice for inability. At the Galactic Assembly sessions, human ambassadors became a reliable source of entertainment. When the Vryn Collective annexed the 6 inhabited worlds of the Pellar Union through military force, killing 17 million Pellar who resisted, the human ambassador proposed economic sanctions. The proposal was laughed out of consideration. When the Theran Empire executed 3 million prisoners of war by spacing them, recording the executions, and broadcasting them as a demonstration of their strength, the human ambassador called for intervention and the establishment of conventions regarding the treatment of prisoners. The assembly species found this particularly amusing. Why would you keep prisoners alive when killing them sent such a clear message? When younger, more aggressive species began conducting military exercises along human borders, deliberately flying attack patterns near human colonies to test their responses, humans filed formal complaints. They requested arbitration. They relocated colonies rather than fight for territory they had legally claimed. Every human action reinforced the galaxy's perception. They were idealists, philosophers, dreamers who had somehow stumbled into the stars without understanding how the universe really worked. They were children playing at civilization while the adults ran the galaxy. War Chancellor Thex'Mor, in particular, took great pleasure in tormenting humanity. At the 60th anniversary celebration of human membership in the Assembly, he raised a ceremonial cup of fermented Krell blood wine and offered a toast that became famous across the galaxy. "To humanity," he declared, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "The galaxy's most entertaining species. May they never change their amusing ways. May they continue to lecture us about morality while we divide the stars among the strong. May they always remind us that there are species in this universe who have not yet learned how the real galaxy works." The assembly erupted in laughter and applause. Ambassador Vasquez, now 87 years old and preparing to retire, sat in the human gallery and said nothing. But those close to her saw something flicker across her ancient face. Not embarrassment, not shame, pity. The provocation that would change everything began on a cold morning in Earth's winter, when Krell fleet movements were detected entering the Kepler sector. Humanity's intelligence network was far more sophisticated than the galaxy realized. Every human ship carried sensor suites that fed data into a vast distributed computing network. Every colony had monitoring stations. Every citizen carried personal communicators that doubled as passive sensing nodes. The result was an intelligence picture of unprecedented clarity and scope. So when 300 Krell warships entered human space, humanity knew within minutes. The ship's trajectories, power signatures, and weapon status were analyzed instantly. Fleet Admiral Chen Zhao, commander of Earth Defense Force, watched the data streams from his office 300 meters below Geneva and felt something cold settle in his chest. The Krell were conducting what they called military exercises in human territory. It was a flagrant violation of sovereignty, but the Assembly's rules were clear. Space belonged to those strong enough to hold it. Complaining would just generate more laughter. For 2 weeks, the Krell fleet maneuvered through human space with increasing aggression. They flew attack patterns near civilian stations. They locked targeting sensors on cargo vessels. They jammed communications between colonies. They broadcast messages mocking humanity's weakness, daring humans to respond with force. 15 human colonies filed formal complaints with the Assembly. All were dismissed. Humanity requested emergency arbitration. The request was denied. Humanity attempted to open diplomatic channels with the Krell Dominion directly. The Krell ignored every message. Admiral Chen watched it all unfold and recognized it for what it was: the galaxy's apex predator swatting at something it perceived as prey, waiting to see if the prey would bare its teeth. The prey had teeth. The galaxy had never seen them. On the 15th day, Thex'Mor himself broadcast a message to Earth on all frequencies. "Humans," his voice carried the tone of a parent lecturing a stupid child. "Your weakness invites aggression. This is the lesson we teach today. Show strength or be swept aside. The galaxy has no place for species who cannot defend what is theirs." Admiral Chen drafted a response and sent it through official channels, knowing it would be ignored but needing it on record. War Chancellor Thex'Mor, you are ordered to withdraw your forces from human territory immediately. This is not a negotiation. This is a final warning. Remove your fleet within 24 hours, or we will remove it for you. When the message reached the Krell flagship, Thex'Mor read it aloud to his command crew. Their laughter could be heard throughout the ship. The humans were giving them an ultimatum. The species that filed complaints instead of fighting, that asked permission instead of taking, that brought poetry to the assembly, they were threatening the Krell Dominion. It was the funniest thing Thex'Mor had heard in decades. He gave the order that would doom his empire. Set course for Verdant. The humans need a demonstration of real power. Verdant was humanity's breadbasket, a world of vast agricultural plains and temperate oceans. Population 4.2 billion, 70% of humanity's food production. Thousands of schools, millions of families, children playing in fields under alien suns. It was the most civilian of human colonies, intentionally developed to be peaceful and pastoral. The Krell fleet emerged from FTL in Verdant's orbit at 600 local time. At 6:03, they opened fire. The bombardment was methodical and thorough. Kinetic impactors traveling at relativistic speeds struck every major city. Plasma bombardment superheated the atmosphere in continental zones. Tectonic destabilizers caused earthquakes that registered off the scale. The oceans began to boil. The continents cracked. It took 14 hours to kill 4.2 billion people. The Krell broadcast it live across all galactic networks. They wanted the galaxy to see what happened to species who forgot their place. War Chancellor Thex'Mor stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching Verdant die, and felt satisfaction. This was the natural order asserting itself. When the bombardment ended and Verdant was nothing but a cooling ball of fractured rock, Thex'Mor broadcast his message to Earth. Humans, the Krell Dominion has claimed your territory. You will surrender 50 colony worlds as tribute. You will dismantle your fleet and place yourselves under Krell protection. You have 72 hours to comply, or more of your worlds will share Verdant's fate. The strong take what they wish. The weak serve or die. Choose wisely. The message reached Earth at 21:47 hours Geneva time. Admiral Chen was in a planning session when his aide interrupted with the news. The room fell silent as they watched the footage of Verdant's destruction. 4.2 billion souls, erased in less than a day. Chen was 71 years old. He had spent his entire career preparing for a war he hoped would never come. He had watched humanity build a civilization of peace and cooperation, and he had been proud of that achievement. He had also spent every single day of those 60 years making absolutely certain that if peace failed, humanity would be ready. He touched the communication panel on his desk and entered a code that had never been used before. "Execute Protocol Apex," he said quietly. Across human space, in orbit of black holes and neutron stars, around pulsars and magnetars, near stellar nurseries and the remnants of supernovas, 3,000 human vessels received the same encrypted message. Configuration change authorized. Unmask. For 72 hours, humanity went silent. No messages to the assembly, no diplomatic outreach, no threats or demands, just silence. The galaxy watched and waited. Most species assumed humanity was preparing a surrender. Some, primarily those who had survived encounters with the Krell, felt a mixture of relief that it wasn't them and pity for the naive species that had finally learned how the universe worked. The Krell consolidated their fleet at Verdant, establishing occupation and daring humanity to try to take their world back. In classified intelligence centers across the galaxy, analysts monitored human fleet movements with increasing confusion. Human vessels were moving, converging from across their territory, but the patterns made no sense. Ships were gathering around stellar phenomena, holding position, doing nothing. A junior analyst in the Vrin Collective's intelligence division noticed something that would haunt her for the rest of her life. She was reviewing energy signatures from a human cargo vessel positioned near a black hole when she noticed the readings had changed. The vessel's power output had increased by a factor of 30. She ran the calculation 3 times, certain she had made an error. She hadn't. She filed a report that was received but not read. It would be discovered later, after everything, and recognized as the first documented proof that humanity had been hiding something enormous. At hour 72, humanity spoke. Admiral Chen's face appeared on every screen in the galaxy simultaneously. The humans had hacked into communications networks across 347 home worlds, overriding security protocols that were supposed to be unhackable. It was a demonstration of capability that would have terrified the galaxy if anyone had stopped to think about it. But they were all too focused on what Chen was saying. For 60 years, his voice was quiet, cold, empty of emotion. We offered you peace. We built our civilization on cooperation and mutual respect. We hoped the galaxy would meet us there. You mistook our choice for weakness. His eyes, dark and ancient and filled with something that made prey animals across the galaxy instinctively hide, stared out from countless screens. The Krell Dominion has murdered 4.2 billion human civilians. They have declared war on humanity through action and intent. This will not stand. He paused, and in that pause the galaxy held its breath. What you are about to witness is not revenge. It is education. You are about to learn what we are when you take peace away from us. You are about to discover why we never needed to show you our weapons. The broadcast ended. 3 seconds later, every monitoring station in the galaxy detected the same thing. Massive energy spikes from human positions across their territory. Those cargo vessels orbiting black holes began to reconfigure. Hull plates retracted. Weapons batteries emerged. Power cores that had been running at minimal capacity suddenly surged to full output, drawing energy directly from the gravitational singularities they orbited. Human mining platforms around neutron stars revealed themselves to be weapons foundries, construction yards that had been building instruments of war in plain sight for 6 decades. Those massive colony ships, the ones that seemed inefficiently large, they were carrier vessels. Each one could deploy 5,000 strike craft. The defensive installations around human worlds activated systems that had been dormant for 60 years. Targeting computers of terrifying sophistication came online. Sensor networks that span light years synchronized into a single distributed intelligence. In the Vrin Collective's intelligence headquarters, the analyst who had noticed the anomaly watched her screens fill with data and felt her 3 hearts stop. They've been hiding a military fleet inside their civilian infrastructure, she whispered. All of it, everything. They turned their entire civilization into a weapon. Her supervisor, a veteran intelligence officer who had spent 40 years analyzing threats, reviewed the data and understood immediately. The humans hadn't built a military. They had built a military civilization disguised as a peaceful one. Contact the assembly, he ordered. The humans. He never finished the sentence. On his screen, human fleets were entering FTL space, and their destinations were clear. Every major Krell military installation in the galaxy. The Battle of Thex'Mor lasted 47 minutes. Thex'Mor was a fortress world, home to 8 billion Krell and protected by defensive systems built over 3 centuries. It had never fallen. 23 species had tried to conquer it. All had failed. The human fleet emerged from FTL at the edge of the system and accelerated inward. 200 vessels against a fortress that had broken fleets 10 times that size. The Krell defenders activated their weapons and discovered their targeting systems were being jammed by something they couldn't identify or stop. Their shields came online and were bypassed by projectiles that somehow tunneled through quantum barriers without triggering them. Their fleet launched to intercept and found themselves fighting an enemy that knew their every move before they made it. Because humanity had spent 60 years studying the Krell, every fleet movement logged, every communication intercepted, every tactical doctrine analyzed. Human intelligence knew Krell defensive protocols better than most Krell commanders. The human weapons were unlike anything the Krell had encountered. Missiles that thought collectively, adapting their behavior in real time. Directed energy beams that exploited weaknesses in shield harmonics that the Krell didn't know existed. Kinetic impactors that maneuvered in flight, guided by AI that predicted target movements with 98% accuracy. But the most terrifying moment came when the battle was over, and the Krell survivors, huddled in bunkers on Thex'Mor's surface, detected atmospheric processors descending from orbit. Human vessels were converting Thex'Mor's atmosphere, making it breathable for humans. The Krell defenders realized with visceral horror, the humans weren't destroying their fortress world. They were taking it. War Chancellor Thex'Mor received the report from Thex'Mor in his command center above Verdant's ruins. He watched the tactical displays showing 12 more fortress worlds under assault, all of them falling with the same terrifying efficiency. For the first time in his long career, Thex'Mor felt something he had inflicted on countless others but never experienced himself. Fear. He activated emergency protocols, calling for reinforcements from across the Dominion. Fleets began converging, preparing to mount a counteroffensive. Humanity was waiting. Human intelligence had tracked every Krell vessel for 60 years. They knew fleet compositions, supply lines, patrol routes, communication protocols. They even had the encryption keys for most Krell military networks, obtained through signals intelligence that the Krell never suspected existed. When Krell fleets emerged from FTL to rendezvous and attack, human forces were already there. The ambushes were perfect. The Krell lost 800 capital ships in the first 4 days of the war. On day 6, Thex'Mor made a decision that would define him as the greatest fool in galactic history. He authorized the use of forbidden weapons, planet-killer missiles, each capable of cracking a world's crust, biological agents that could sterilize entire biospheres, reality-warping devices that violated the fundamental laws of physics and sanity. He launched them at Earth. Every single one was intercepted. The planet killers were destroyed before they completed their FTL jumps. Humanity had apparently been tracking them with some kind of FTL sensor network that shouldn't have been possible. The biological weapons were neutralized by countermeasures that suggested humans had obtained samples and developed cures decades ago. The reality-warping devices simply failed to function. Their activation codes mysteriously changed. Admiral Chen broadcast a message to Thex'Mor personally. "We knew about your doomsday weapons. We've known for 60 years. Did you really think we weren't paying attention?" The Krell began to retreat, falling back toward their home system for a final defense. Thex'Mor gathered every remaining ship, every soldier, every weapon. He would make humanity pay for every meter of Krell space with blood. The galaxy watched it all in real time. An emergency session of the Galactic Assembly convened, the chamber filled with species whose carefully maintained power structures were crumbling. The humans had demonstrated capabilities that rewrote every strategic calculation. Their technology was generations ahead of what they had shown. Their intelligence networks were frighteningly comprehensive. Their military coordination was flawless. "We must ally against them," the Theran Empire's representative declared. "The humans are the greatest threat the galaxy has ever faced." Before the vote could be called, every screen in the assembly chamber activated. Human vessels were in orbit of Concordia Station, not attacking, not threatening, just present. And then Admiral Chen walked into the chamber. He moved slowly, an old man in a simple uniform, flanked by 2 aides. He walked to the central speaking platform where Ambassador Vasquez had stood 60 years ago, offering peace. "We did not want this," Chen said, and his voice carried the weight of 4.2 billion dead. "For 60 years we showed you who we are. We are builders, explorers, dreamers. We came to the stars with hope." He looked up at the Krell seat, empty now, Thex'Mor absent as his empire burned. "But we are also survivors. We come from a world that tried to kill us every single day. We evolved to be the deadliest thing on our planet. Then we chose to be something better. We chose peace. We chose cooperation. We chose to build instead of destroy." His eyes swept across the assembled species. "The Krell took that choice from us. They killed our children. They destroyed our world. They did it to demonstrate power, to teach us the lesson that might makes right." Chen's expression was carved from stone. "Consider the lesson learned. But understand this, we are teaching one in return. You are about to see what happens when you awaken something that chose to sleep." The battle for the Krell homeworld lasted 30 hours. Thex'Mor had fortified his homeworld with every weapon, every soldier, every desperate measure his dying empire could muster. 43 billion Krell civilians sheltered in bunkers, praying to their war gods that their military could somehow turn the tide. Human forces surrounded the planet and broadcast an ultimatum directly to Thex'Mor. Surrender command. Face trial for genocide. Your species will be spared. You have 1 hour. Thex'Mor's response was everything his warrior culture had taught him to be: defiant, proud, certain of his righteousness. Come and take me, humans. Show me this power you claim. Fight with honor if you know what honor means. Admiral Chen, watching from the bridge of humanity's flagship, closed his eyes briefly. He doesn't understand, Chen said quietly. He still thinks this is about honor, about strength, about proving who's the apex predator. He opened his eyes. Deploy ground forces. Minimize civilian casualties. Take Thex'Mor alive. What followed would be studied in military academies for centuries. Human soldiers landed on the Krell Homeworld and fought building to building, street to street. They used weapons designed to incapacitate rather than kill. They employed tactics that separated military forces from civilian populations. They fought with a precision that seemed impossible in urban warfare. Krell military casualties: 847,000 soldiers. Civilian casualties: 412, all accidental during the ground invasion. Thex'Mor was captured in his command bunker, still shouting about human weakness, still believing that mercy was cowardice. He never understood. Until the end, he never understood. The Galactic Assembly convened for sentencing 3 months after the war ended. The Krell Dominion no longer existed. 800 worlds had been given independence or placed under Assembly supervision. The Krell species itself remained intact, diminished but alive. War Chancellor Thex'Mor stood in chains before the Assembly, his armor removed, his conquest marks stripped away. He was nothing now but a war criminal awaiting judgment. Ambassador Elena Vasquez, brought out of retirement for this final duty, stood at the speaking platform. She was 92 years old now, ancient by human standards, but her voice was steady. 60 years ago, she began, I stood here and offered you peace. I offered you friendship. I offered you the best of humanity. She looked at Thex'Mor. You laughed, you mocked us, you called us weak. You killed 4.2 billion of our people to teach us a lesson about power. She paused. The lesson we learned is this: the galaxy understands only strength. Peace is mistaken for weakness. Cooperation is seen as naivety. Mercy is interpreted as inability. Her eyes swept across the assembled species. But here is what you failed to understand about humanity. We come from a world that made us fight for every breath. We evolved to be apex predators. We survived by becoming the most dangerous thing on our planet. Then we made a choice. We chose to be more than just killers. We chose civilization. She turned back to Thex'Mor. You took that choice from us. You forced us to become what we had chosen to leave behind. And you discovered the truth. There is nothing more dangerous than a predator that chooses mercy and then has that mercy thrown back in its face. The Assembly remained silent. The Krell killed 4.2 billion humans in 14 hours. We dismantled their empire in 11 days and spared 42 billion Krell civilians. That is the difference between us. That is what you failed to see for 60 years. She delivered the sentence the Assembly had already agreed to: life imprisonment for Thex'Mor and his command staff, their remaining years to be spent in facilities where they would be forced to learn about every species they had driven extinct, every civilization they had destroyed. We are returning to our space now, Vasquez said, and her voice carried to every world in the galaxy. We hope you will join us in building a better galaxy. We still believe in cooperation. We still believe in peace. We still believe in the dream we brought to you 60 years ago. Her expression hardened. But if you will not join us, stay out of our way. Because we also learned another lesson. We will never again allow someone to mistake our choice for peace as inability to wage war. We are humanity. We chose civilization, but we have not forgotten how to survive. 10 years later, Verdant was being rebuilt. The world would never be what it was. 4.2 billion dead could never be replaced. But humanity had returned, had brought soil from Earth and seeds from 100 worlds, had planted forests and filled oceans and built cities that would serve as memorials and homes both. Children played in those new cities, born after the war, never knowing the galaxy that had existed before. They learned about the 11 days that changed everything. They learned about the price of peace and the cost of war. And above them, human ships patrolled, no longer hiding, no longer disguised. The galaxy knew now what humanity was capable of, and that knowledge had changed everything. Human proposals at the assembly passed with near-unanimous support. Human ships were given immediate clearance through all territories. Human territory was respected, honored, protected by species that had once mocked and laughed, not because humanity had proven it could destroy. The Krell had proven that for millennia, because humanity had proven it could choose not to. Admiral Chen, now retired, stood in a memorial garden on the rebuilt Verdant and looked up at the stars. Somewhere up there, the galaxy continued turning. Species rose and fell. Empires expanded and contracted. Wars flared and ended. But they all remembered the lesson of the 11 days. "We showed them," a voice said beside him. Ambassador Vasquez, ancient now and leaning on a cane, stood looking at the same stars. "We showed them what happens when you mistake peace for weakness," Chen agreed. "Do you think they finally understand?" she asked. Chen was quiet for a long moment. "Some do, some never will, but they all know now that we gave them a choice. We offered peace. We offered cooperation. We offered the best of humanity." He turned to her, and in his eyes was something that made even an old woman who had faced down the galaxy's mockery for 60 years feel a chill. "And when they rejected that gift, we showed them what we chose to leave behind when we reached for the stars. We showed them the predator, the survivor, the species that earned its place at the top of its world's food chain." Vasquez nodded slowly. "And now they know," she said. "We never needed to show them our weapons because we never wanted to use them. But we always could," Chen finished. They stood together in the garden, two old humans watching stars that belonged to species who had learned the hardest lesson the galaxy could teach. Never mistake humanity's choice for peace as inability to wage war. Never laugh at those who offer friendship. Never think that mercy means weakness, because humanity remembers what it chose to leave behind. And if forced to choose survival over civilization, humanity will make that choice. And the galaxy will remember why we rose to the top of our world and why we chose to climb to the stars instead of conquering the worlds below. We are humanity. We chose to be dreamers, but we never forgot how to be survivors. And we really hope you remember that before you force us to remind you again.